This is Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, brought to you by the Iowa Soybean Association, your daily recap of the information that affects Iowa's farmers, producers, and consumers, right here in the heart of the heartland. With reports from our award-winning broadcast team of Dustin Hoffman, Riley Smith, and Mark Magnuson. Now, from the IARN studios in Des Moines, here's Dustin Hoffman.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Hoffman. Today's Wednesday, August the 9th, 2023. We're so glad you could join us. Coming up later on in today's program, we'll have a chance to talk with Vice President of the Organization for Competitive Markets, Mike Schultz. We'll also take a look at that ag weather outlook, but first, let's take a look at those markets. It's time now for the Ag Matters PM Closing Market Summary, your source for market analysis and settlement prices from the day's trade in Chicago, courtesy of the folks at agmarket.net. Well, we're at the end of another trading day, and it's time to turn to Tyler Schau of agmarket.net. Tyler, what did we see happen in those grain markets today?
A lot of mixed price movement in the grain markets. Corn was up. It's going to close down 3 or 4 cents on the day. Soybeans were up fairly strong early on and overnight and early this morning. Gave up most of their gains throughout the day. Wheat's kind of just been resting on their lows here, although it did have kind of a spike overnight. So, and seeing that really across a wide range of markets. Crude oil has been high to low. About a $2 range today. Add that to a $3 range yesterday. You got about a $5 range in crude over the last 2 trading days. So just a lot of uncertainty out there in all of the markets, and grains are right there with them, trying to find some value somewhere.
Now, I know that we've had a few things that have obviously gotten the grain market's attention, and first of all, that would be weather. I know here in Iowa, we're seeing a lot cooler temperatures than what we would normally be seeing, and actually what we had seen in the past couple of weeks, but also getting some very beneficial rains across the state. I mean, obviously the market's taking notice there.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's some of the pressure today. You know, we got the WASDE report coming out Friday. You're starting to hear private groups and some estimates come in at, 177, 178, all of a sudden, 179 as a national yield and 53 on beans. I'm not like, I guess right now I don't have an opinion either way. There's going to be some arguments as to whether or not those numbers are attainable or not, but just the fact that people are now starting to talk about that, when just a month ago we were talking a 173 to a 174 yield on corn. Just that change in weather has really changed the sentiment on what production is going to be, and so as a reminder, in the August WASDE report, any yield expectations, or if they make any changes to their yield expectations, most of that's done off of farmer surveys. When we get into the September report, that's where we have some USDA boots on the ground out there doing yield counts and estimates and all that kind of stuff. So it's still going to be dependent on farmer estimates. And that's the one thing I might say you might keep that yield from jumping a lot here in this August report, because mind you, that was as of 2 weeks ago. And so a lot's changed in the last week to 10 days.
All right, and of course, when the grain markets have any kind of movement, livestock markets react. Let's start with cattle. Tyler, what did we see on that side?
Back and forth trading on cattle too. The last 2 days we've struggled on the cattle side, both feeders and fats. Today, marginally higher. There's really not a lot of news on the livestock side, to be 100% honest with you. I mean, the news is not news anymore. We've been talking about the shortage of cattle really since a year ago, well over a year ago. We're still short cattle. Packers are having a hard time finding enough animals to kill. Feedlots are finding a hard time finding animals to put into them. The big question just comes back to how high can prices go, and have we maxed that price point out? And I think that's where we keep hovering around. If you look at a chart on feeders, really pick your flavor as to what month you look at. Really haven't done much in the way of trading, just kind of basing right around a certain level. If you're looking at November, in this 250 mark, plus or minus $5 really for the last month is where we've been at. And so it's tough to push it one way or the other. And again, it's a good reminder for producers that these are, it's never a bad idea to lay into hedges at record high prices. your back month hogs, November, December, took kind of a bit of a beating. I mean, I ain't gonna lie, there's not a lot of news there either. Just kind of back to where we were middle of the week last week. So just waiting on some news in both of those markets to push them one way or the other.
All right. Well, if folks want to talk some of their market strategies and already start thinking about plans they should be making maybe on next year's crop already, what's the best way for them to get in touch with agmarket.net?
Check us out on the internet, agmarket.net. If they want to call me directly, 701-987-6009. And you mentioned real quick, making some plans on some crop for next year. Within about the last week, agmarket.net has sent out a couple of hedge recommendations for 2024 crop, both on corn and beans. So it's never too early to get started on making some sales there.
All right. Well, Tyler, we thank you so much for the insight, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
You bet. Thanks, Dustin.
That again was Tyler Schau of agmarket.net. Let's run down the closing numbers. That comes to us courtesy of the folks at Bar Chart. September corn down 4 3/4 at 481 even. December new crop down 4 1/2 at 494 1/4. September beans up 1 3/4 at 1355 1/4. November new crop up 2 1/2 at 1308 1/2. Soy meal down $5.60 at 412.70 per ton. Soy oil 23 cents higher at 64.21. Chicago wheat 19 3/4 cents lower at 661 3/4. Minneapolis down a dime at 835 1/2. Kansas wheat down 5 1/2 at 776 even. December oats up 3 3/4 at 434 1/4. August live cattle 87 cents higher at 180.57. Feeders are $1.15 higher at 247.15. Lean hogs 45 cents lower at 101.65. Pork cutouts are $1.07 lower at 110.42. Class 3 milk 7 cents lower at 17.29. And that's been a check of our market recap. We're going to take a short break here from our sponsor, the Iowa Soybean Association and the Soy Checkoff. When we come back, I talk with Vice President of the Organization for Competitive Markets, Mr. Mike Schultz. This is Ag Matters PM.
Iowa Soybean Association is driven to deliver for Iowa's 40,000 soybean farmers. We're proud to provide objective agronomic research, a helping hand with soil and water stewardship, and timely industry news powered by the Soybean Checkoff. Learn more at iasoybeans.com.
Welcome back to Ampm from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Huffman. Well, we've talked at length with members of the Iowa Congressional Delegation, especially Representative Ashley Hinson, who is a big supporter of the EATS Act, and of course the author of the EATS Act, I should say. And she has been putting forth, and the whole delegation has been talking about some of the benefits of that program and what that can do to reverse some of the issues we faced with Prop 12 in California. However, not everybody is on board with that. Some of them are worried that there could be some unintended consequences. One of those groups is the Organization for Competitive Markets, and we talked with their Vice President, Mike Schultz, and here's what he had to say. Well, right now on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, we're talking with Mike Schultz. He's Vice President for the Organization for Competitive Markets. Mike, thanks for taking a few minutes to talk with us today.
Sure, glad to do it.
Now, we also know that you are a livestock producer. We were just talking off the air here about your cattle operation up there in Northwest Kansas. You're also a member of the Kansas Cattlemen Association. So when we get into a discussion like we're having, obviously we want to make sure the listeners know that you are a livestock producer, because we're going to be talking today a lot about the EATS Act. And so we want to let them know that you have firsthand knowledge of the industry.
Right. Yes, I actually produced hogs and got out of it because of the market issues. And then I'm a cow-calf producer, and we feed cattle, and we do sell beef from time to time, direct market sales.
All right. So the reason we're talking today is we've been spending a lot of time, especially with the Iowa delegation and Congresswoman Hinson, who's been behind the movement on the EATS Act that we've come to know in a response to Proposition 12. Now, obviously, the Organization for Competitive Markets is saying that we need to pump the brakes on this. So tell us a little bit about what the concerns are that you have as a livestock producer, someone who understands the markets, as to what your problem, or I shouldn't say problem, what your concerns are with that EATS Act and what you guys are trying to get, message you guys are trying to get out.
Okay, well, I'm from Kansas, and Senator Marshall, I know him personally. We used to hunt together. We've been at odds over this bill, and my concern is with a lot of legislation, it starts as top down, and the federal government forcing issues on state and local producers. I have a problem with that. If we request the federal government to help us, then it's a different deal. Proposition 12 in California was voted, as I told Senator Marshall's staff 2 weeks ago when I was in D.C., They voted 60% of the population voted to support it. Whether you believe it's right or wrong, I said the fight needs to be taken to California. You need to educate the producers there, the consumers, what they're talking about. What the bill comes down to is instead of having a 12 square foot farrowing crate, which crates are not a bad deal. I've told people I raised hogs in the 80s and I've seen sows eat pigs. So I know all about that stuff. But, they want to give them 24 square foot of room. There's a lot of producers in California that have already met that standard. And so Proposition 12 just enhances that if you want to sell pork in that part of the country, you're going to have to meet their standards. And, I don't have a problem with that. A lot of independents have already met and comply with the rules. I've dealt with anti-competitive practices from the big packers. The Smithfield Corporation is owned by China. That's one issue I have with it. They've been buying land in the U.S. I have a problem with that. I fought those bills in the early 2000s and was called a protectionist, and we were hindering trade and all that. But I still believe things come back to where the people, the citizens that vote, should have the right and a say in what goes on in their state. As an example, in Kansas, we have a country of origin labeling law, and it's not being enforced. And it frustrates me because I'm a big fan of promoting the USA beef product, USA cattle industry, and I get tired of people dumping foreign stuff in on our market. I sat in on the USITC trade case in 1998 over the live cattle imports. And so part of that problem you get into is when you get dumped, if somebody dumps product in on your market, it depresses your price. And the Smithfield deal is actually what that's all about, is to give them access over there to dump pork into that market. And I understand part of it, but the other side of it is there are very few independent hog people left in the United States. Most people are contractual. They're contract growers. As I tell them, they're hog house janitors. That's why I got out of the business in the 80s. They didn't have enough buyers for our hogs. And so I wasn't going to be a hog house janitor, and I quit. Got into more cattle. So that's kind of what happened.
All right. So the question was, before we go into the China thing, let's just stay on Prop 12 for a minute. I know there is concern, and I know you made the point that a lot of the pork groups that we've talked to in the past, and some of the people we've talked to in the past, say we need to work on education, because it seems like, and it feels like, some of that stuff may have been pushed through with a shade of misinformation. Not that that would ever happen, But the thing is, there are some concerns, even outside the ag industry, that this could be a slippery slope, where if every state has its own set of its own set of rules as to how to do things, we could either have 50 states with 50 different regulations, which could be a problem, or we could also have, what if, California decides to tell Iowa how to produce hogs, but Iowa then can turn around and tell California how to produce almonds. We could have interstate trade wars, is a concern that's being raised. I mean, do you guys see that being an issue, and see that being a problem with, any industry, not just in livestock?
Well, that's true, and I'll give you some examples. I know when I talked to Senator Marshall's staff, first I was told that it only entails the food industry. That's all they were going after, because I brought up some examples. Firewood, for example, you can't transport firewood from certain states into other states because of disease and pest issues. You can't take a boat out of certain bodies of water into other bodies of water because of the Invasive Species Act. Tuberculosis in the cattle industry is another example. So, part of the issue with the Supreme Court ruling that ruled in favor of Proposition 12 was over what they call the Dormant Commerce Clause. And that is that you set standards that other people can't comply with. Now, as I read the clause in that law, it says that as long as you're the same, you have to be held to the same standards, and you can trade there, then it's okay. That's kind of what they're calling the gray area part of it. I get a little concerned. Part of it is there are a lot of independent people that would like to fill that market, because the marketing should be good. California consumes about 13% of the pork we produce in the United States. China does not produce pork well. I mean, they do a lot of it, but the health and issues over in China are a lot different than the United States. And we've got pork producers here that grow the pork. I get it, but I'm just telling you that we've decimated an industry to have a lot of smaller local produced stuff for food safety and security, and I just have a real problem with who we're dealing with.
Now, we talked about China, and could you give us an example of how China can benefit? I know we talked about Smithfield. We've talked to, in emails before this about how China could get an advantage in this marketplace if something like the EATS Act goes through. Can you explain how that would happen?
Well, they'll basically, to the producers in California that have already complied with the law by expanding the farrowing crate size, it's like a foot wider and 2 foot longer, that, they don't have to compete with that. And so by being a contract grower for Smithfield, they basically want to dump pork into that market. And I'm not sure that the consumers are willing to accept that the way it's grown. I used an example the other day to a person on an interview is McDonald's. Years ago, they talked about, cage-free chickens producing their eggs. And I just read a deal the other day. They're going on with that. I mean, that's a big deal because the consumers that come into McDonald's don't want to have pen-raised chickens. And so what do? You got a company telling everybody, if you're going to sell to us, this is the way we're going to play. So, I tell people like Senator Marshall's staff, this bill is what they always throw up to me, and they say, oh, there's a lot of unintended consequences. And I suppose there could be, but I'm telling you, we'll deal with it when it comes. I don't think every individual, they worry about cattle feeders. They're going to regulate the cattle feeding deal, regulate the pork industry. I get it. When you get so big, there has to be some regulations because they do become a little bit above the law. And then you're in a case like in the cattle industry where they just, we're going to go ahead and do this because it's always been done that way. Well, if we enforced the P&S law, Packers and Stockyards law, a lot of that stuff would have been stopped years ago. But because of the money and the power, people are afraid to talk about it. So, the pork deal with China, the money's going to leave. Imports damage domestic production. As the U.S. ITC trade case in 1998 over the cattle industry said, and around page 38, you can be damaged by a small supply of imports, even as little as 5%. And so that becomes an issue to me. We're talking about importing stuff from disease-known countries. It should scare the hell out of people. I don't understand why we're sitting here, we just got to take something from everybody. The United States, we're at a loss for trade balance. We're a importer. We're not a major exporter. And, China's hammering us. I mean, they beat us every day. And I think somebody has to stand up, whether it's buying the farmland, whether it's producing the hogs. We have to set some rules because if you want to race to the bottom, try to compete with Chinese labor laws. I mean, they don't do anything and they can sell it here. And, you have no differentiation of product because of labeling. You don't know if it's produced in here or China. They simply ship it in, box it, repackage it, and it becomes U.S. product. And I think that's wrong. So, to put the brakes on this thing, I think because of the Supreme Court case, because of the things I know about other things in the industry, as the firewood, the boating, the tuberculosis issue, meat sales, in Kansas, interstate shipment of meat. We wanted to do that in 2004, and we were stopped by allowing that to happen. And, those are state laws that are basically, we couldn't get pushed through to the federal level. And during a farm bill, I think a bill like the EATS Act is damaging to small independent pork producers, and poultry producers too, as far as that goes. But and eggs, I don't know if you bought eggs, but the free range eggs are bringing about $10 a dozen. People that want to deal with that, if it's so lucrative, by doing that, everybody ought to get into it. and create more in the industry. That's one thing I always said about the organizations. My group and my time that I've spent with people, I want more producers, more processors, so that consumers can feel good about what they're getting. And I don't see that that's a problem.
All right. Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us today. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.
That again was Organization for Competitive Markets Vice President Mike Schultz here on Ag Matters PM. Let's run down that weather outlook. Well, we started the day with some rain here in Des Moines. Definitely welcomed again another couple tenths of an inch across parts of the state. Definitely welcomed and resupplying that soil moisture little by little. Of course, though, we're going to start the Iowa State Fair. Are we going to see some cooler temperatures? Are we going to see some rain? Well, let's see what the National Weather Service says for the next 24 hours. Well, we definitely saw a good mix of clouds and sun throughout the day here, and widespread chances of showers and thunderstorms kind of all over the place, in and out throughout the day. Highs were anywhere from the mid-70s to the low 80s. Now, tonight we'll see decreasing clouds, may even see some clear skies off starting in the west. Highs will be in the upper 50s to around the mid-60s. And then tomorrow, for the first day of the Iowa State Fair, sunny skies. Highs will be in the low to mid-80s. Now taking a look at the affiliate weather map for you for tomorrow. Cherokee will be sunny and 82. Shenandoah looks to be sunny skies and 84. Des Moines and Clinton both sunny and 86. Albia sunny and 83. Waterloo to be the hot spot tomorrow. Sunny skies and 87. For more detailed forecasts in your area, tune to your local Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network affiliate. And that's been the Ag Weather Outlook. And with that, we're at the end of today's show. You can find all our content online at iowaagnet.com. Also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, and on our YouTube channel. While you're there, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you're notified each time we put out a new video project. Also, don't forget about our free market podcasts. They come to you on Amazon, Apple, Spotify, Google, and Podbean. From the IARN studios in Des Moines, I'm Dustin Hoffman. For Mark Magnuson and Riley Smith, we thank you for watching. This has been Ag Matters PM.